Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai, and back in here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to just add a little bit more in regards to this topic we were discussing in our in-class on boasting. And I wanted to read through actually a story in regards to a king that was doing, a bit of boasting, right, towards the Heavenly Father, right? So this is one of the kings of Assyria named Sennacherib. And this was during the time of King Hezekiah's rulership, right? So essentially, you had this king named Sennacherib, one of the king of the Assyrians, king of Assyria, right? And he made an invasion towards Judah, towards Jerusalem, right? So what I wanted to do was to just read through a bit of the story, right? And then you kind of just, kind of like pull out and extract certain themes and mindsets from this particular king, right? Because even though the person may not be of our particular stock, of our lineage, of our bloodline, it we can still learn from them, right? And the scriptures say that the things that are written aforetime are also written for our learning, right? So since we're kind of talking about this topic of what's it called, boasting, right? And I guess this is really just boasting in a negative sense, right? So this is something to you know um ward away from, to shun that type of behavior, right? So I want to read through this story, and Lord's will, as always, this will be edifying, right? So I'm just going to read down a couple chapters, a couple verses. So this is Second Chronicles chapter 32. I'll start at verse 1 in the NIV. And it says, "After all that Hezekiah hath so faithfully done, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, thinking to conquer them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come, and to that he intended to wage war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his officials and the military staff about blocking off the water from the springs outside of the city, and they helped him." And it says, verse 4, "They gathered a large group of people who blocked all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water?" they said. Then he worked hard repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He built another wall outside that one, and reinforced the terraces of the city of David. He also made a large number of weapons and shields. He appointed military officers, the people, and assembled them before him in the square of the city gate, and encouraged them with these words: "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and discouraged because the king of Assyria and the vast army with him. For there is a great power with us than with him." So this is Hezekiah, right? And given essentially an exhortation towards the people. So I'm gonna get down. I kind of just want to establish what's actually being done here, right? So this is in the middle of a siege, right? So it's in the middle of a siege, things are very tense. You're making certain plans to actually keep your walls, and you're trying to keep your living space safe. So here it says, continuing on, this is verse 8, and it says, "With him are only arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, our power to help us and fight our battles," right? So this is, the king given his exhortation. And the people gained confidence from what Hezekiah, the king of Judah, said, right? So this is Keep this in mind. This is just the exhortation, right? But I'm reading this to kind of establish, um, this is pretty much Hezekiah's exhortation is pretty much boasting in a righteous sense, right? Giving that exhortation. And I kind of wanted to just touch on the boasting in regards to in a wicked sense, right? Also, just so you see the contrast between the two, right? Because sometimes people, they might say that you're essentially your aura that you give off, you're very arrogant, you're very confident, you're being boastful. Like if we boast in a righteous sense in Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, right? Because we know that and understand that without the Lord we are essentially nothing, right? Um, it says, this is verse, where was I? Okay, I was at verse 9. So, right. So this is Second Chronicles chapter 32, verse 9. And it says, and when Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and all his forces were laying siege to Lachish, he sent his officers to Jerusalem with his message for Hezekiah, king of Judah, for all the people of Judah who were there, right? So this is a response. And it says, and this is what King Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, says. So this is what he's saying. On what are you basing your confidence and that you remain in Jerusalem under siege? When Hezekiah says, the Lord, our power will save us from the hand of the king of Assyria, he is misleading you to let you die of hunger and thirst. Do not let Hezekiah himself remove this God's high places and altars, saying to the king of to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before one altar and burn sacrifices unto it. Right. So basically, he's serving as an agent of doubt and distraction, right? So this is verse 13, and it says, do you not, so this is what this is his response of what he's continuing to say. And it says, do you not know what I and my predecessors have done to all the people of the lands? Were the gods of those nations ever able to deliver their land from my hand? Who of all the gods of these nations that my predecessors destroyed has been able to save his people from me? How then can your God deliver from my hand? Now do not let Hezekiah deceive you and mislead you like this. Do not believe him. For no God is of any nation and kingdom has been able to deliver his people from my hand and the hand of my predecessors. How less will your God deliver you from my hands? Right. So this is, not only is he serving as an agent of doubt, he's trying to dim, he's trying to dim, the confidence, right? And understand that, for the sake and title, of this lesson, he's pretty much, boasting in is basically like his track record, right? He knows his predecessors, and as a king, a king has substance, a king has military, a king has subjects, so this is those like carnal things, so on and so forth, are able to give him a certain type of pomp, give him a certain type of arrogance, for him to speak very boldly. And because he was never put down, he thinks that he is like the Most High, right? He thinks that there's no other power above him to be able to intervene and put him in his tracks, right? Because he doesn't understand that his position was given to him by the Lord, right? And he has his track record of success from the Lord, but the Lord is the one that's in control of everything. The scriptures say that, I form the light and create darkness, right? So the Lord is in control of all these things, right? So this is, him in his carnal mindset. He doesn't understand that there's a higher power in control at stake here, right? So what I wanted to do, let me just go to the book of Proverbs. One second. Actually, okay, so before I go to Proverbs, I just wanted to jump. I want to jump down to verse 20 just to see just to get an understanding of the end result of what actually happened, right? So this is verse 20. So it's Second Chronicles 32 and 20, and it says, "And King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, cried in prayer unto heaven about this, and the Lord sent an angel who annihilated all the fighting men and the commanders and the officers in the camp of the Assyrian king, so he withdrew to his own land in disgrace." It says, "And when he went out to the temple of his God, some of his sons and his own flesh and blood cut him down with the sword," right? So, you know, in the I believe it was the in the KJV, I'm not the KJV, I'm sorry, in Kings, when you read it in the story in Kings, he had a huge army, and the Lord pretty much had annihilated. It was about 185,000 of his army, right? So the point is mostly focusing on him bragging and boasting about his track record, about his predecessors, military might, as a king, the type of pomp that he had. Little did he know that this was going to happen, right? Because Hezekiah here was a righteous king, and the Lord came to his defense, right? So, it just shows, even a king in this kind of mindset, he can't even, you really and truly cannot even be boastful. There's really no need, to be boastful. And how much more, us in this, state, where we're not, I mean, I don't want to say it like this, but we're not kings, you know, where we have that type of sovereignty and rulership and so on and so forth, right? We're pretty much sitting, we're pretty much, as the scriptures say, as princes that sit in a low place. We're not in that level of sovereignty at the moment. But the point is, like, even a king here, he got humbled because he was boasting in the physical, things that and the his own track record, so to speak, right? And that's not something, we can, that's not even wise for us to do. And if we boast in the Lord, his presence, his, him being there for us, comforting us, and giving us the strength to persevere, right? So here, let me go to Proverbs. So this is Proverbs chapter 27, verse 1, and it says, "Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. Let another man is let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thy own lips," right? So it shows you, he was giving, he was trying to big up and praise himself, but you know, you see the contrast, between King Hezekiah and then this king here, King Sennacherib, right? He remained very humble, and King Hezekiah boasted in the Lord, right? So let me go to Proverbs. As a matter of fact, I'll go to Ephesians. One second. This is Ephesians chapter 2, start of verse 8, and it says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is a gift of the Most High, not of works, lest any man should boast." Right? So we don't boast, in us having, um, our, our physical stature. We don't boast in, of, you know what I mean? Like, we don't boast in, the knowledge or whatever it is, because even the knowledge itself, puffeth up, right? We don't boast in these carnal things. Even, Paul said, he was essentially a Hebrew of the Hebrews, circumcised on the eighth day of the tribe of Benjamin. But all those things didn't even make a difference, because, he counted all those things but dung, right? So we don't boast in that sort of in those we don't boast in the carnal things, right? Our countenance, and how much push-ups we can do, and you know what I'm saying, like, just to show you the difference in the mindset between, King Sennacherib, right? And he's the type of, as a king, you have a lot of substance. Like, think about it. You think about, how a lot of these kings live. They live lavishly. They have, they're they don't really have a lot of, what's it called, a lot of so-called adversity. They have a lot of, wealth and substance, handmaids, servants, women, gold, jewelry, cupbearers. Like, they have it all. So, for somebody who thinks that they have it all, why would they think that they need a somebody to come to their aid? They don't think like that. So a Sennacherib, he's boasting like, "Oh man, I don't, I could take you down, so on and so forth," right? But he wasn't boasting, he's not boasting in the Lord, but King David was, right? So that's why the king, he was a man after the Most High's heart, right? He was, King David boasted in the Lord, right? So that it shows you the difference. He boasted, not of his own physical strength. But King Sennacherib, he's boasting in his predecessors, in military strength. He's that type of person, right? So it shows you the difference, in between, both individuals here, right? So, let's go to Proverbs 21. This is Proverbs 21 and 31, and it says, the horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord, right? So it shows you, he's going in, and you think about it in a carnal sense, and a warrior can prepare, they can, shine their helmet, polish their shield, tie their shoes, do all the, all these physical things to, prepare themselves for that, that moment, to go into, battle. But, ultimately the safety comes from Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, right? And it shows in the example that I just read, that the safety, that protection, was divine, and it came from a higher power to protect Hezekiah and, our people, during this time of the siege in Jerusalem, right? So it shows you that, when we boast in righteousness, we boast in the Lord. We don't boast in, ourselves and how much, push-ups we can do, and so on and so forth, right? So, that's pretty much it. I kind of just wanted to read that story, just to get an understanding of, yes, we do come off, very confident, but we don't, because we boast in Yahweh Bashem El Shai, and we don't boast in, our physical stature, so on and so forth, right? So, anyways, or even the carnal things that we have, right? So, Lord's will is always that this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.